The Miami Dolphins walk into Week 13 carrying more weight than they want to admit, and yet there is something different in the air, something they have not felt for weeks. No speeches, no announcements, just that quiet sense that the team might finally stop holding its breath. For a while, everything felt stuck, as if every snap needed luck instead of confidence. But now there is this shift, barely noticeable from far away, but unmistakable when you look closer. Reinforcements are close. Not whispers, not vague hopes. Real possibilities. Real players. Real impact. And if that does not stir something in this team, then what would? Darren Waller, the one piece the offense kept missing without fully knowing how much it hurt, stands on the edge of returning. His injury pushed the Dolphins into a rhythm that kept breaking at all the worst moments. The field never opened the way it usually does. The timing between Tua Tagovailoa and his receivers felt forced, like every throw depended on perfection. So now imagine Waller back in the middle of all that, not rushing, not dominating everything, just existing in the space Miami kept searching for and failing to fill. Can a single presence change an entire offensive mood? The Dolphins might find out in a matter of days. His movement, his awareness, the way he positions himself without calling attention, those pieces became the missing pulse in an offense desperate for calm. When Tagovailoa scans the field, the absence of that dependable middle option has been obvious. No need to hide it. No need to deny it. The offense leaned toward urgency instead of flow. Now, with Waller stepping closer to activation, something steadier enters the picture. Not dramatic, not loud, just something that lets the quarterback breathe again. And in this stage of the season, who on this team is not craving a moment to breathe? Austin Jackson's situation adds another layer to everything. His toe injury forced reshuffling across the line, and that disruption haunted the Dolphins across entire drives. Every adjustment felt temporary. Every snap brought uncertainty about protection, and every failed block carried that familiar sting of a line missing one of its anchors. So when Jackson's name appears as a real possibility for Week 13, the energy around the offense shifts again. Because his return is not about one block or one matchup. It is about restoring combinations the team trusts. It is about giving Tagovailoa those seconds he has been missing. It is about allowing the offense to function without feeling like it is scrambling before the play even develops. And here comes the real question no one around the league wants to say out loud. What does a Miami offense look like when it finally stops patching holes and starts operating with its actual pieces again? Can this team look like itself in time? Or did the missed opportunities already carve damage too deep to repair? Waller and Jackson are not saviors. They do not erase the standings. They cannot undo the mistakes from earlier weeks. But they can change the temperature of the locker room. They can shift the tone. They can remind this roster that it still has enough strength to compete, to push, to make the final stretch uncomfortable for anyone who thinks Miami is finished. The Saints will not make any of this easy. Their defense thrives on challenging everything: space, timing, composure. They love forcing quarterbacks to hesitate. They crowd lanes. They squeeze routes until every decision becomes a burden. And the Dolphins know this. They know Week 13 is not the kind of matchup where everything suddenly becomes simple. But what if difficulty is not the enemy here? What if this is exactly the kind of game Miami needed, the kind that demands intention instead of panic? The Saints bring a physical style that exposes every weakness, but they also expose every strength. If Waller suits up, the defense immediately has to account for someone who understands how to create those subtle advantages Miami has been missing. If Jackson returns, the line gains a presence that brings confidence back into the structure of the offense. And suddenly, the Dolphins enter this matchup with options they have not had in weeks. When was the last time this team walked into a game feeling like the plan did not need improvisation? The timing could not be more unforgiving. December does not offer comfort. It strips everything down to urgency and reality. And right now the Dolphins sit at 4-7, far from anything resembling playoff positioning. It is not dramatic to say every remaining game becomes a moment of truth. If they let another week slip away, the season shifts from difficult to nearly unreachable. So what do they do with this tiny spark of hope? Do they treat it like a turning point? Or do they let it fade like so many moments before it? There's a feeling around this team that something has to break. Not in a collapse, not in frustration, but in a release, like the pressure needs somewhere to go. When Waller and Jackson were both ruled out, the Dolphins played like a team fighting through tension they could not control. Drive stalled. Timing unraveled. Confidence shook. And at some point, even the most composed teams feel that weight. So maybe the return of these pieces is less about talent and more about relief. Maybe this team just needed a reminder that not everything will keep falling apart, that some things return, that stability is not gone, that this roster does not always have to fight its way through chaos. Will that alone change the outcome in Week 13? Nothing promises that. Nothing guarantees anything. But when players who matter step back onto the field after weeks of absence, the entire heartbeat of a team adjusts. Teammates respond. Coaches breathe easier. The quarterback stands taller. Even the huddle feels different. And if the Dolphins want any chance of rewriting the direction of this season, they will need that shift as soon as possible. There's also something else lingering in the background, something that people do not always consider when talking about injured players returning. It is the emotional charge, the sense of, finally, we get one back. It is the moment when the locker room looks around and realizes the group is becoming whole again. Everyone feels that. Everyone feeds off it. And in a season where Miami has constantly been forced to adjust, this feeling alone might be enough to alter the mood heading into a must-win week. What does Waller bring beyond his role? What does Jackson add beyond blocking? It is the belief that the Dolphins still have time to pull themselves together. It is the belief that all the difficulty did not break them beyond repair. It is the belief that maybe, just maybe, this season still holds something meaningful. And if you are inside that locker room, that belief matters more than any statistic. The Dolphins have been waiting for a moment to claim, something they can point to later and say, this is when everything started to turn. Will Week 13 be that moment? They cannot expect miracles, but they can demand effort. They can push themselves into discomfort. They can use every ounce of energy these returning players bring. And perhaps the greatest question of all, do they still trust themselves enough to rise when the season is on the line? If Waller steps onto the field, even in limited snaps, the offense gains stability it has not felt in far too long. Routes open. Timing smooths. Defenses hesitate. And Tagovailoa, who has carried the burden of forcing plays, finally gets a chance to distribute instead of compensate. If Jackson returns, the line gains structure. Protection becomes deliberate. The pocket feels calmer. And the offense can stay on schedule instead of rushing into desperation. So here is the truth the Dolphins must face. Week 13 does not offer mercy. It does not slow down. It does not care who is hurt, who is returning, or who needs momentum. But it does offer an opportunity. One that might not look dramatic from the outside but can shift everything inside this team. They know what is at stake. They know how close the season is to slipping away. They know the door to the postseason has not closed yet, but it is far from wide open. If they want to keep that door from shutting completely, they need to take this week and make it matter. And maybe that is why the potential return of Waller and Jackson hits so strongly. It is not about the headlines. It is not about the matchups. It is about timing. It is about hope arriving exactly when the Dolphins needed something to believe in. Because if these two step onto the field in Week 13, even in controlled roles, something inside this team shifts. Something becomes possible again. Something feels alive. And the biggest question left is the one only the Dolphins can answer. When the reinforcements finally arrive, will Miami rise with them?